All right, Kevin back with you, and we're here for another round of the $1 Million Relationships podcast. And today I'm here with Scott Maderer. Scott, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
I am thrilled to be here. I look forward to our conversation.
I've been looking forward to this too. And I want to, I want to start by just giving a shout out to Marcus Newcomb because he's the one that introduced us. And
Yep,
without him, Scott, we probably would never would have even met. And
absolutely.
I just want to, thank Marcus for his role in that. And what a testament right there to the power of
Of
right
relationships.
relationships
Yeah.
because, and of course, that's what this podcast is all about. And
And
so,
then the funny thing is Marcus introduces us and then we talk and then it turns out we know other people in common too,
yes.
because that's
Yes.
always the way. It seems like the circles are a lot closer than any of us ever believed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Yeah. It really is a small world.
Yeah.
And well, I want to start. I just want to, turn it over to you to start with. And we're just going to start talking about what you do and all that. And I'll just start with a really simple question to begin with. Scott, what do you do and who do you serve?
So I call myself a stewardship coach,
Okay.
meaning I focus on helping small business owners master their time, their talent, their treasures so that they can live out their calling.
Okay.
Okay. Translation. A lot of folks when they're first starting out in business, and I like to work with the folks that are kind of in that transition or maybe early on, they're getting started, they're still a solopreneur, they're still a micropreneur even.
Mhm.
Micropreneur is like when you're a side hustler and it's you still got a full-time job that's actually paying the bills.
Yep.
And I like working with them at that place because a lot of times what they feel like is holding them back is time and money.
Uh-huh.
I either don't have enough time or I don't have enough money, or when I have time, I have no money. When I have money, I have no time. That constant battle between those things. And then what I do is they sign up for help with those things. And the truth is, those are the symptom. They're not the problem. And then what we do is work on the talent component, which is your beliefs, your mindset, your heart set, the way you're looking at things, the way you're handling things, the way you're making decisions. We fix that, and then the time and money take care of themselves.
Gotcha. Gotcha. How long have you been doing this kind of work, Scott?
So I got a lot of different answers to that. So
Okay.
I started it as a part-time business in 2011.
All right.
And I was in that same transition world. I was working a corporate job, working 60, 80 hours a week, had a big team, flying all over the country, doing all of those things. And because my wife and I went through our own personal kind of journey of financial struggle, I was suicidal because of finances. We almost divorced because of finances. We radically changed the way we were living our life.
Okay.
And suddenly people started noticing that we were weird, and doing weird things and making weird decisions. And they started coming to us and going, "Hey, can you help us be weird? Can you help me
Ah,
figure this out?" And out of that, it became a coaching business. And eventually, in 2017, I took it full time. But
okay.
my other answer is I've been doing this since I was about 8,
Okay.
because my mother will tell you, she laughs. She's like, "Yeah, you call it coaching." She's like, "You've been doing this your entire life. This is your personality. This is what you've always been the kid that everyone else always came to and said, 'Hey, help me figure this out. Help me work this out. Help me start this thing.' I started my first business when I was 12. I hired a bunch of my friends to work in a painting business, and we went
Okay.
around and painted things. And then I started a lawn care business. And I've always been that kid that didn't necessarily do it all, but
Mhm.
could help other people live out what they were really meant to do.
Okay.
That kind of stuck whenever I was in high school, because I was always in the friend zone with the girls. You know how that works, right? I
Yep.
was always the guy they went to for advice. As an adult looking back, it's like this was all for the good. I think as a grown person, it makes me a better person. But in high school, that was a little bummer. But that's the way that works.
Yeah. Yeah. So what did you and your wife start doing that caused other people to notice and like, hey, can you help us with this too?
Yeah, so for a lot of us, it was around money. That
Okay.
was the biggest struggle that we were having, and a lot of it was how we made decisions around money. So, as an example, I talked about getting a corporate job and working in the corporate world. I suddenly got hired in a corporate. I'm making very good money.
Mhm.
I'm kind of in a executive position, and I'm driving a 1999 Ford that was so sun bleached that it looked gray. It was actually blue originally. And the headliner, I literally had to glue it back up every couple of days because the heat of the sun in Texas was causing it to fall off and hit me in the face, and I'd have to glue it back up there. And, people are looking at me going, dude, go buy a new car, and I'm like, why? This works. It gets me from point A to point B. That's all I care about right now. We've got other priorities. We've got other things that my wife and I have decided we're going to do with our money. We've got more important stuff to do. This is just a car. It's not important. And I think that's really the key, is they suddenly saw that I was very clear on what my wife and my priorities were.
Okay.
And I wasn't letting anything else get in the way of those. It's like, if that's what we're supposed to be doing, that's what we're doing. All the rest of the stuff is a distraction.
Okay.
And so my attitude at work changed, the way I made decisions. I'd show up in meetings and all of a sudden I'm the guy that's saying out loud the stuff that nobody, was brave enough to say out loud.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which the irony of that is I immediately got promoted, and start rising in the company. And I really do attribute that to the philosophy I had around money, because all of a sudden I didn't feel like I had to do this just to make the money. The money was the servant, not the master, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I think people started noticing that difference in the attitude and the behavior and the decisions and the thinking that we were making, and started saying, hey, kid, you're doing something different. This is weird. This is not how normal people live. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah. Yeah. I was raised in the church. And so all my life, I've heard the pastor talk about tithing and stuff,
Uh-huh.
But it wasn't until 22 years ago where this church that we were going to at the time, they hosted this DVD series called The Blessed Life by this guy, Pastor Robert Morris and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And when I heard that, it was a 4-part series. And so each night, I think it was Monday through Thursday, I drove to church. And at that time, it was like a 30-minute drive each way to go to church where we are. But I went to watch that video series, and my entire life, I had never heard it explained the way that he did. But through that process, I was like, wow, now I get this in a way that I never did before. And now all of a sudden my relationship with money, it changed.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened is I started tithing, not like, well, because I understood that, that in my life, that tithe, that wasn't my money anyways.
Right.
And so I'm just giving back what was already God's, and I'm just giving back. But what I've also, the bigger picture that came from that whole experience all these years is that, what? We're not leaving this earth with nothing. Nothing is ours really anyways. We are just stewards of what we've been given.
Right.
And the better steward we are with whatever, with money, with relationships, with whatever, the better steward that we are, the more that we're given to be a steward of.
Right.
And that's been my experience. And I'll tell you, man, when we just do our best to be a good steward of what we've been given, it's really pretty amazing how much we are given to be a steward of.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing, is it doesn't always show up in just money. I mean,
No.
A lot of times in churches nowadays, unfortunately, the word stewardship has literally come to mean we're starting a building campaign and please fill out this donation card. And that is not at all what the word means, because like you said, it's everything. It's time, it's relationships, it's our thoughts. It's none of these things are ours. And I do, I am a person of faith, and I put this into the faith circle. But honestly, like you just said, I don't care if you're a believer or not.
Yeah.
It's just yours temporarily. I mean, you only got so long. So, I don't care who you are, you're not going to be here forever. So when you realize that, then all of a sudden you start thinking about, well, how am I managing it for, whether it's your kids, whether it's the larger community, whether it's, your spouse, it doesn't matter. It's every decision you make, everything that you have impacts not just you, but everyone else. And when you realize that your life, your impacts spread out in ripples like that, like throwing a a pebble in the middle of a pond. And by the way, you have no choice. They're going to spread out like those ripples, whether you want to
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah.
So you don't get to control whether it happens, but you do get to make decisions that control to some extent what those ripples do. Are they lifting people up, or are they tearing things down?
That's right.
Is it watering irrigation and growing, or is it a flood that's ripping everything out by the roots?
Yeah.
That is where you actually have some sense of your decisions and your attitude and your heart. That's where that's where you have control.
Yeah.
And once you realize that, then all of a sudden it's like, it's not even about, is money flowing in, is money flowing out, is time flowing in, is time flowing out, is this flowing in, is that flowing out? It's, hey, what are the impacts of these things? What are the influence of these things on other people? And what is the message I'm putting out? What is the signal, the energy? It's always, I always struggle with what words to use, because different words resonate with different people, but it's the thing that you're putting out into the world.
Yep.
That's what's important.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, because now it's like, maybe it's not money that flows back. Maybe it's something else this week. It doesn't matter.
That's right.
Again, relationships. Most of the growth that I've had, and this is true, perfect for your show, isn't through, quote, somebody handing me a bunch of money. It's through the relationships that I built.
Right.
Yeah. Now, money also shows up a lot of times, but the money was the after effect. It's the effect, not the cause.
That's right.
The cause was the relationship. The cause was the energy and the connection and all of that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I've long said, that, when the bigger impact we make as entrepreneurs, the more revenue that gets created. Revenue is the byproduct, the natural organic byproduct of impact is revenue.
Sure.
And so the bigger impact we make, the more revenue that gets created. That's just the way it works, And so, but we don't focus on the revenue. We focused on the impact. How do we make our biggest impact?
Right.
And I can tell you, it's a whole lot easier when we partner and collaborate and co-create with like-minded people than it is trying to do it all on our own.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
well, and even if you are, a solopreneur right now, and by the way, that doesn't mean you would be that forever. Could be, depends on what decisions you make.
Yeah.
But the idea there still is, how do I make an impact on others? That part doesn't change, because again, scale and impact, we talk about that things, and immediately people go to numbers. Oh, I had 1,000 people on my event or whatever.
Yeah.
Honestly, you could have more impact with 10 people.
Absolutely.
If they're the right 10 people.
Absolutely.
So it's not a numbers game. That's, again, we get trapped in this idea of the vanity metrics. How many friends do I have on Facebook? Really? That's not really the measure of impact.
That's right.
I can have a one-on-one coaching relationship, and the right question at the right time for the right person helps them go out and impact 1,000 people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really was only touching one.
Yep.
But no, I wasn't.
That's right.
The question I asked ripples out again.
That's right.
We forget that. It's so easy to get caught up in, and partly it's because it's easy to see. I can see if there's 1,000 people in the room. I can see if there's 10 people in the room. 1,000 feels bigger than 10.
Yes.
And I can't see, did I change their life? Did I, are they going home a different person than they came in? They came in as one person and they left as a different person. And so we get caught up on the numbers part of it. And like you said, the real important part is to just focus on the impact, the influence, the connections that you have, and the other stuff flows naturally.
That's right.
Again, back to what I talked earlier about, I help people with time and money, wink, wink, because the real truth is time and money are the symptom, because what happens is the way you handle yourself shows up in your time and money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the time and money aren't the cause.
Yes.
They're the effect.
Yes.
They're the effect of the habits and the mindset and the systems and the beliefs and the, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so we look at it as, oh, I just need the magic app. If I just got the right budgeting tool, my money problems are all solved. No, they're not.
No.
Not that a budgeting tool doesn't help,
Yeah.
but that's not really the fix. The fix is you. The
Yes.
fix is between your ears and in your heart.
That's right. That's right. Well, so what is, and we don't have to name names here, but what's an example of a result that you've helped a client get that you're just incredibly proud of, Scott?
So I can give you a couple of them.
Okay.
Let me give you, just because they illustrate different things.
Okay.
That's why I kind of want to pick two different things. So I've got a couple. They're actually an example that I have in my book, and they don't mind me sharing their name. It's Peter and Allison, and they're named in the book as well, so that I have permission to share that. And one of the things, so he had worked for an agency. He was a marketing guy. She was a nurse. They made good money. He quit the marketing agency and had started his own marketing business. And it was growing, but it wasn't doing that great yet. And, they were struggling some. And there was always the balance as a couple between, what do we put into the business? What do we bring home? How do we communicate about this? Are we really on the same page? Maybe he should go back and get a job, blah, 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 blah. The whole thing, it was really all around their communication and whether they were on the same page. Okay. They also had goals about, getting out of debt, paying off a house, these sorts of things. But again, to me, the most important thing was that communication and being on the same page part. The rest of that stuff would take care of itself. And sure enough, their goal was to pay off their house by time and get out of debt by the time they were 40. They were in their early 30s. They didn't think that it was even really possible given the situation they were in. We started working together. Pretty quickly, his business began to grow. She eventually got to a point where she doesn't have to work overtime and she was she was working extra shifts just to bring in enough money. And now she's at a point where it's like, if she doesn't want to work an extra shift, she just doesn't work an extra shift. They've got plenty of money coming in. His business 10x'd in growth, all of these things.
Wow.
And yes, they paid off the house and they did it by the time they were 38. So they beat the 40. Yep. Yes, they got completely out of debt. They just recently remodeled their basement and paid for all of that with cash. So all of these money things showed up. But here's the truth. You want to know the difference? It was the fact that all of a sudden they started talking together. They got on the same page. She understood what was going on in the business. He understood what she was worried about at home. Mm-hmm. They began to, have a plan. They began to communicate about the plan. Yeah. Got on the same page. We're back to relationship, right? All the rest of it stuff is the result. So all these goals that they checked off. But still to this day, and I've been working with them now for about 10 years now. Okay. 8 years, 9 years. But why do they keep working with me? Because again, it's that accountability of having someone come in and, are we on the same page? What's different? What's changed? What do we need to reset? What do we need to refocus on? And kind of redoing that. So to me, that's a huge impact because it's around that communication and that ability to get on the same page. Yeah. Yeah. The other example I'll use is somebody that kind of was in that corporate world. Okay. Wasn't liking it, was hating every minute of it, really had that drive to go start their own business, didn't know what they wanted to do, but, kind of was kicking around a bunch of different ideas. And again, same sort of thing. What was really holding him back, because he kept thinking, if I just come up with the right idea, well, it wasn't the right idea because you're never going to come up with the right idea. You uncover the right idea. In other words, I don't think. Let me ask you: is what you're doing today exactly what you expected you would be doing today? 20 years ago? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Right? And I've yet to talk to an entrepreneur that goes, "Oh yeah, it's exactly what I pictured." No, it's not. By the way, if they say that, they're probably lying. So it's like what he needed to do was get started. And so again, this is a young guy. Got him started down that road, experimenting on the side, growing something single in this case. So no communication. It's just about him. But what's interesting is he changed corporate jobs, which is, but why? Because again, he was trying to get to something more aligned with what he felt called to do, what he no longer just working for money, working for purpose.
Yeah.
He started something on the side. Here's what's fun. He discovered he didn't actually want to quit his corporate job. He
Wow.
wanted to be a part-time entrepreneur and work doing what he was doing and using what he was doing to fund the work that he was doing as a part-time entrepreneur, because he wanted to do all this stuff in health and wellness, and the startup costs were more expensive than, he didn't want to go out and take a bunch of loans out. In his case, this was, and he, how can I do this? So he started a juice company. Okay. And he's now a kind of a boutique juice seller, like health drinks, right? Because he's a gym nut, and this is what he loved. And he started making his own juices. Everybody else is like, dude, those are great. I'll buy them from you. So now he's running that on the side. He's still working the corporate job. And again, it's the reason, by the way, both of those jobs are making him money. But again, what it was is that discovery process of uncovering. It wasn't really about, quote, hating my job or having to go start a business to do something I love. It was about discovering a way to intentionally create a life that works for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the way, that life does not necessarily work for anyone else on the planet.
That's
and probably won't work for him for the rest of his life,
Sure.
But he still was able to, it's that process of intentionally creating a life that you want.
Yeah.
That's the part that gets me excited.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right, having that, for 22 years, I have been focused on, because, I'm a husband, I'm a father to 7 kids, grandfather currently to 6 grandkids, and we'll have another grandchild joining us in a few months. And
congratulations.
And I love family, and I wouldn't trade none of that for nothing. And for 22 years, I'm like, I have been focused on, not only do I want to have a business, but I want to be the husband and father that I want to be too. And not just the entrepreneur that provides financially, but it's not really present for his family. I want to be there for my wife. I want to be there for my kids,
Right.
And so I have been. And sometimes that means saying no to opportunities because it just didn't align with what my priorities were,
Right.
And that's totally fine. That's totally fine. It's now paved the way to some really big opportunities that are in 100% alignment with all of that,
And that's what's funny is if you hadn't said no to some of those things over the years, you wouldn't have created the space for the yeses to come along.
Yes.
Because people look at that, and this is why we beat ourselves. I was talking to someone earlier today, like they were regretting a decision they had made 6 months ago. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Let's go back in time for a minute. 6 months ago, what did you know? Well, I knew this, and I knew this, and I knew this, and I knew this. Okay. And you weighed all those options and you made a decision. Yes. 6 months ago, did you think that was the best decision you could make at that time with the information you had then? Well, yeah. Okay. And you have new information now.
Yeah.
And so you're mad at past you for not knowing the future.
Yeah.
How's that fair? And yet we do this all the time, right? Totally. We close doors and we beat ourselves, and we second guess. Oh, maybe I should have taken that opportunity. Oh, what would have come along? And it's not, don't get me wrong, this isn't a YOLO, you only live once, just live in the moment kind of thing. That's not what I'm saying. But it's be strong enough to make intentional decisions and then live those decisions out.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And when you do that, when you have that ability to do that in the long run, I've always seen it work out.
Mm-hmm.
It takes time. It's not easy. It's not simple. This is not a magic wand.
Yeah.
It just eventually works out.
Yeah. 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 Well, so now that we've got some context set here, and this has been really great, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, and I want to move. I want to start focusing on relationships. So, to start with, I'm just going to ask you a simple question. So, Scott, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons. And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Absolutely. And we could spend the next 4 hours, right, listing people, because every person I know, for good or ill, has impacted who I am today. And sometimes the impact was, I don't want to do what that person's doing, and other times the impact's been, I really, admire
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
but I'll highlight two people. So the first one is, and everyone's going to recognize this name. It's John C. Maxwell, John Maxwell. In fact, you'll notice one of his books is on the shelf behind me. And the other one is Dan Miller, and that's going to be the other person. There's three books back there on the top shelf. One is my book, one's John's, and one's Dan's. And the reason for that is those two gentlemen have been huge influences on my life. First, virtually.
Okay.
And that first, I started reading their stuff and following them online and listening to podcasts and doing all of those things that we can all do. And then over time, I've actually gotten the opportunity, again, through relationship, to spend time with each of those gentlemen in person, in a mentor relationship, actually ask them questions, be influenced by them more directly than just virtual. But, honestly, again, the relationship started one-sided. I was listening to them. They had no idea I existed, but eventually turned into a relationship where, they actually knew who I was as well as me. So, John Maxwell is one, and Dan Miller from 48 Days to the Work You Love for the 48 Days Company is the other gentleman.
Awesome. So what is an example of a situation where you personally, Scott, got to make a really substantial impact, and maybe even the moment, maybe it even surprised you a little bit, but at the same time, you also know that would have never been possible if not for your relationship with either one of these two gentlemen that you just mentioned. What's an example of something like that?
The book. So I wrote the book Inspired Living, and that book in part came out of both of those gentlemen.
Okay.
First, John, in that, of course, anyone who knows John Maxwell knows he's written, I don't know, 200 and something books now. It's insane. But the idea that he had about, I've talked to him about, how does he curate ideas? How do you generate ideas? And I had become a podcaster by this time. As a podcaster, what do you have to do? You have to generate ideas. What am I going to talk about this week? What am I going to talk about this week? And so I kind of adapted his process to that, and then realized all of a sudden it's like, wait, I'm creating all this content that could be turned into something else. And Dan is the person that introduced me to people who said, okay, you're creating all this content. How do we turn it into something else? How do we turn it into a book? How do we turn it in? He's the guy that gave me the idea and the process of how to repurpose what I was already doing and begin to turn it into other things. Okay. So, again, out of those relationships with each of them, a podcast, which was the one thing I was doing, has turned into a book, has turned into a course, has turned into other things that are now impacting more and more people than just the people that listen to the podcast. Than even just the people that are signing up for me, for my coaching, it's touching people that I don't necessarily have to touch directly. Yeah. If that makes sense. Yeah. Which makes the impact larger.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, there's all kinds of people that have the opportunity to listen to our podcast or read our book that we may never meet personally and stuff. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
I got an email from a guy in India the other day who wanted to compliment me on something in the podcast. And it's like, I mean, what are the odds that I would ever meet somebody in India who could, drop me a note about something that they heard from me, and yet, he's literally on the other side of the planet.
You bet. Yeah. And how rewarding is that to get that kind of feedback, to hear from somebody across the world that they reaching out to say, hi, I'm here and I see you, and I just
blows my mind. Every time it happens, it just blows my mind. And it's why I love, Yeah, there's things about today's world that I don't love, but it's also there's things about art today's world that I do love. And
Absolutely.
the fact that we can connect to people in more real ways at greater distances is a good thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, sometimes we use that exact same technology to not connect with people, and that's a whole other
Sure.
conversation.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
the fact that we can use it as a way to build bridges and connection and understanding, to me, is the most tremendous part
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for anybody listening to this, Scott, that is thinking like, man, Kev, I really like Scott. I love who he is. I love how he shows up. And then maybe they're thinking like, man, maybe I should check out what Scott's doing. Because I think based on what he shared here today, he might be able to help us. Any websites, any resources we can share with folks, Scott?
Absolutely. So I put together a landing page over
Okay.
at my website. I do this just so it's easy for your listener. If they go over to inspiredstewardship.com and then
Okay.
just /$1 million relationships, just like the podcast, but all one word,
Okay.
no spaces or anything. What you'll find there is I've got some free resources. So if you want to try something out for free and check it out, there's a place you can put in your email and they'll be sent to you as well. There's a place you could schedule a time if you got questions or just want to say hi. I encourage people to do that. Information about my book, my podcast, all of that is over at inspiredstewardship.com /$1 million relationships.
Awesome. Awesome. Scott, any last thing that you feel led to share before we call it a wrap?
I think the word that I want to share and come back to, and we both said it a couple of different times in here, is about that intentionality piece. And I think, as an example, I talked about John and Dan. Those were people that I read their books and, I thought about things that they said and it was important to me. I intentionally worked to get to a place where I could meet them and spend time with them, and it's not in other words, that didn't happen by accident,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So that's a relationship example, podcasts, same thing, I meeting Marcus, who introduced us, all of those things, you curate those things very intentionally.
Yeah.
And that's how you curate the life that you ultimately want,
That's right.
is through that intentionality. And I would encourage people to start being more intentional in the decisions that they make.
Yeah. 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 Because that's all it comes down to is the
Really is.
decisions that we intentionally make. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Because so many of us just live our life kind of by default.
yeah.
You live it with the habits that you have, and you got to go through life. And I did it again. Don't get me wrong, I did that, and there's still days that I do that. There's still days I get to the end of the day and go, it wasn't really the best day. I did not really make good intentional decisions today. Let me do something different tomorrow. So that's the other thing, I guess, is I don't want to hold myself up, and I'm sure you don't either, is, oh, I've got it all figured out. I've got it all together. No. It's still a journey. It's always a journey, but working at it and doing that every day and trying to be a little bit better today than tomorrow,
That's right.
and then the next day, and then the next day, that's really what makes the difference over years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Scott, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today and to share from your heart. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you, and I am totally stoked to get this out there and share it with a lot of folks. So, thank you so
Awesome.
much, Scott.
Thank you so much. I appreciate coming on.
You bet.